So I've been looking forward to this talk. Jim's a bit of a maverick, but he's a long-time attendee of the marketing meetup as well. So if you could do the honour of welcoming Jim onto the stage.
Isn't it great to be introduced as a bit of a maverick? It's an absolutely brilliant start. Good evening and welcome. I am not a marketer, as you will see very shortly. Is that, well, somebody's happy about it. Good. Nice to hear that. Now, have I got this correct? I have a question for you. What is the common factor between the year 1927 and 2017?
7.
No, it's much more than that. It's rather global. Is it to do with population? Is it to do with wars? Is it to do with food? You know, global warming? Actually, the answer is 2 billion. Because 2 billion was the world population in 1927, and apparently the active Facebook members in 2017. That's a rate of growth which is unbelievable. Now, I'm not sure how long Facebook has been functioning, but smartphones have only been around about 10 years since the iPhone was launched. That's the rate of social evolution that's going on. And my topic tonight, which is resistance is futile, in case you didn't read it, the Trekkies will recognise where it comes from, is quite simply, are we capable, are we evolving fast enough as people to manage the rate of social change that's going on around us? Are we managing it effectively as for marketing, for individuals? That's the question I will be addressing. Now, one question for you all now, and I'd love a show of hands. How many, if you'd love to, and I'm asking about the confident ones, how many people here are fairly confident on video or live video or standing in front of a camera and talking away and delivering your message? Okay, so maybe 10%. I wonder why. Now, the growth, I'm not going to argue about this. I didn't prepare this. I found it online on BI Intelligence. Yeah? This is the apparent growth of mobile video. And what is now happening is that we've got the greatest, fastest opportunity that has ever taken place in the world for growth, for getting our message out there, for building our communities, for marketing, for selling. Now, as I said, I'm not a marketer. What I do understand is that for smaller businesses, for entrepreneurs and smaller businesses, of which I'm sure there are many here in the audience, it's all about personal branding. And personal branding comes down to the lovely poster Joe had earlier on, you. And that means getting out there and expressing yourself in a very profound way and it doesn't matter what your message is, but getting out there and being comfortable with it. Now, do you remember when you were about 2 years old, or your kids are 2 years old or something like that, you didn't have a problem with expression. It was like, yeah. Think about weddings and funerals, all that. Shh, shut up. Be quiet. Yeah? And what happens is, generally speaking, as children, we haven't got a problem with expression. But by the time we get up to teenage years or older years or even with a few grey hairs, we've acquired a whole mode of behaviour, which is we have to be careful, we have to check everything, we have to make sure we're not going to upset anybody, people in authority, be nice to the opposite sex, etc., etc., etc. Yeah? And some older generation are holding doors open for women. I'm not sure that's appropriate at the present time, but the point is we acquire a whole mode of behaviour which limits us in so many ways. And when we stand in front of an audience, quite often, as I used to, what's happening is every possible scenario that we've acquired along the way, growing up, which has hurt us a little bit emotionally. We've been laughed at, we've been bullied, we're told, you're never going to amount to anything. Yeah? Because if we see somebody looking at us in the audience who's kind of looking a bit suspicious at us, or a bit strange, or don't believe him, then that tends to press our buttons. And that means it's bringing stuff to the surface where we are not confident, and that comes up. Now, when it comes to live video, it's a different story, even more so, because it's another level. I'm sure many people here happily talking away if we were to see me. If somebody came in with a video camera on their shoulder, a nice big one, there'd be lots of people kind of shrinking behind somebody else and carefully turning the other way. Yeah, I used to do this, and that's about not being seen. But if we are to cope with this level of change that's happening, and we're to get our message out there, and we're to do our personal branding, we've got to evolve, and we've got to evolve fast. Is everybody happy with that? Nobody's desperately unhappy, throwing bricks? Good, okay. Now, the other little bit of change is, reputedly, 85% of jobs will exist in 12 years' time. We don't even know what they are. So traditionally, going back a while, a career, you set out on a career, whatever it was, and it tended to be in the same way. It might even be with the same employer, and you got a pension, and then you retired, and then you were, happy ever after, or something like that. Now it's change. And many of you here are sufficiently younger than me that you have lived with that, but not everybody has. But that level of change means the adaptability, the being comfortable in your skin, working with change, working on camera. And if you want to stand out and be seen, I reckon that's a pretty good example of standing out and being seen, but just one thing missing, the audience. But it could be on, live on Facebook. If we want to be seen, we have to stand out, we have to be different, and we have to either work with or challenge our own limitations that we have. And I don't recommend challenging them. One thing that's very common I hear these days is, I've got to set this target and I'm going to smash it. Many people here are really comfortable with that idea. Because if you've got a target, an objective, an achievement you want to do, you're going to smash it, or you're going to get it and go, reward yourself. I'm not so sure that language is actually helpful, and I will come to the inner voice shortly. An alternative is, we can feel like this guy. Anybody recognize him? That kind of feeling? I certainly used to feel like that once upon a time. And going back quite a few years, when I was at Domino Printing as research manager, and sometime around then, Terry was the marketing department, and back then, engineering and marketing, they didn't quite speak the same language. We used to have some interesting discussions. And whereas I actually heard a talk here a few months ago by somebody from Genie, I think it was, and it was a real breath of fresh air for me, where it was, you take an approach, you try, it's not working, and then you take something else. That was really amazing for me, because this is not about Terry, this is about how I perceived marketing back then, because I was the other side of the fence. And this is part of being adaptable, understanding the other people's point of view. Now, how did I go from there to where I am? Well, way back, I had a 2-day convention and presentation training course in-house with my colleagues. And it was great. I just had a bit of a laugh on video and everything else. When I came to standing in front of the audience, I was a bit of a wreck. I was all over the place, I was incoherent and not delivering a clear message because I wasn't confident. And what I know now is that a lot of conventional presentation training, for some people, simply doesn't work. There's a lot more under the hood, if you like, that needs dealing with. And I decided at that point there was something wrong with me. And a bit later, I had a midlife crisis. You could call it that. I could call it all kinds of fancy things. And I ended up, as a result of that, training in energy healing, lots of mind-body stuff, hands-on, all kinds of things. And don't worry, I'm not going to do anything to you. And it turned out that I then realized I could use these techniques to deal with my own stuff, and ended up working with Toastmasters in Budapest, 180 Toastmasters from across Europe on stage presence and personal confidence, and helping people overcome stage fright and all kinds of issues. Somebody here may or may not recognize this person is in Cambridge. I worked with them, and they are a technical expert in their own right. They were called to be an expert witness in the States. That's really challenging, because that puts your values, your beliefs, potentially you're staying away from a job, and it came to me through family stress. I actually worked privately with them. I worked with them a few times, and the problems disappeared. They went to the case, or twice, I think it was, went to the lawyers in the States, sailed through it with the greatest of ease, won the case, and also got some kind of significant career boost. It says on the video that there was an unspecified numbers of millions of dollars would have been involved had they lost the case. So that's where that figure comes from. Now, suppose you've started your business and you have a plan. This affects your life, project, or business. Doesn't matter what it is. So you're going to do something, and you set your intention. You're going to build the greatest app. You're going to run the viral video. You're going to build this amazing marketing company. You've got your intention, and you're putting everything into it. But somehow, it doesn't always happen that way. Okay, there are lots of other things that we don't choose that affect us, but there can be. So we have our intention. That's your intention, your big drive, yeah. But there can be another one running in the background that says, "No, you don't really want to do that because this has nothing to do with the dog." But if your friend Eric happens to be talking in your ear and saying, "You can't do that, not right. You haven't got permission." It might be Erica, by the way, just to keep gender neutral. And so Eric or Eric is chattering away in your ear saying, "Can't do that. You're not allowed to. It's not right. You haven't got the money. You never get the finance. Blah 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 blah." Yeah, that pushes you off course. So you get into self-sabotage mode, or you cause things to happen. Now, so that can happen a lot, and there's a lot of underlying stuff we can have. Call it human engineering, which is not very often talked about. So I hope this is actually getting a lot of attention, because judging by the eyeballs on me, I certainly think I'm getting a lot of attention, the right kind. Now that could be a typical project path, where we're worrying, money down the toilet, everything else. I found it somewhere online. That can happen due to circumstances around us, colleagues, partners, not enough finance, the idea wasn't properly researched in the first place. But we may always also be causing that. But let's go a bit further. Let's get into the human engineering part. Now, this breaks every rule in the book compared to the previous one. Listen, I chose the colours and I thought, yeah, it looks better in 3 days. The important thing is to be able to get yourself laughed at and not be too embarrassed about it. That's an important skill. It takes a little while to develop. But as individuals, any individual, we can be carrying a static level of certain emotions. Now, I'm sure you can all relate to somebody you know who's always a bit angry, the red one. They're always a bit sort of angry about something. It's the way they come across to you, yeah? Or you can have somebody who's incredibly success-driven, or somebody who doesn't make it, or somebody who's always in arguments. And it's not necessarily their fault. They haven't necessarily chosen to. Because it's not something they teach in business school that I'm aware of. It's not something they teach in college. It's kind of way out there on sort of psychology and sort of woo-woo stuff. But actually it's not woo-woo, because it's every single one of us. Suppose your little rocket ship you're based on success. You're going to be out there and you're going to succeed. But suppose your great-grandfather or grandfather in the 1930s, in the Great Depression, lost everything. It's a failure, shame, guilt, money issues. All those beliefs, it's called epigenetics, is a scientific term, where it can come down the ancestral line. If you're running failure through no choice of your own, through no concept of your own, you're actually running that underneath. You can do what you like on there, but you've got those two rocket ships pushing together, actually going head to head. So the chances are, and it doesn't affect everybody, that's the other interesting thing, the chances are that that person will really struggle. Or maybe it's like they're stuck in mud all the time, and they're moving along, they're doing their best, they're trying really, really hard, but they don't necessarily succeed. Or you take the person with conflict. They want to raise finance for their business. How are they going to get on with the investor, potential investor? Conflict? Think they're going to have a good relationship with him? Do you think they might get turned down a few times? All these can be measured, not scientifically in the conventional sense, but they can be measured and a lot of them can be cleared and changed. But we don't all have to sort ourselves out. We're not all a mess. It's only when they're a problem. Right, just checking. Now, the next one. I'm afraid this one definitely fails compared to the previous chart. I had to scan it because my software wouldn't do this, so I printed it out, drew it, conventional. Again, any project. Sorry, did I miss something there? Okay, it's a chart. Well, exactly. That is created little numbers in Excel, carefully put on there for good reason, and I will explain. This is time against progress. Okay, everybody got that? Yep. Right. So we start off here. So we take a speciality, a career, a pet project we're doing, it doesn't matter. The same principle applies, or you're a business. Level 10 is where you're a superstar. You're the creme de la creme, the best of the best, in whatever it is we're talking about. So most people starting out in their business or the project or whatever, they're not starting as a specialist. They're starting somewhere down here between, say, a 2 and a 5, level 2 to level 5. And they start off and they work away, and then they hit some challenges. Doesn't matter what those challenges are, they start to struggle a bit. And then what they do is they break through those challenges by any one of thousands of possibilities, and they carry on progressing up, and then they hit another set of challenges. And they're not quite sure what's going on, but they try, they fail, they try, they fail, they struggle along, and maybe this goes on for months or years or whatever it is on here, and eventually, somehow they get through it. And then they can go to the next level, and a new level of limiting beliefs or some kind of thoughts, or not believing they have permission to work, to have that many employees, to make that much money. It can be any one of those can hold us back. It's stunning stuff. I worked with, let me think. I was working with somebody recently who, she's a coach, healer, and she was getting coaching from somebody in the States who said, basically, go out there to get your clients, go out onto Facebook, go and engage lots of people and gradually filter them in and work with them and so on. So she got a smallish number, came down to her funnel, and then he said, well, it's time to make your pitch. So she did. 6 in a row, bang, disconnected. So obviously something is wrong there. So maybe his approach is right and maybe hers is not. When I spoke to her, this is elaborating on what I was saying earlier, when I spoke to her, we worked through it. She was sending out with her intention, her message, if you like, say it was like a beam of just pure, I can help you do what it is you want to do to these people, and this is how I do it. But underneath that, there was a modulation of that message of limiting beliefs about not being able to have clients and not being able to get the money in. And that may have been part of it, but 6 out of 6, that's pretty spectacular. So something strange, it now turns out that we actually worked together and realized she was working with the wrong clients. They worked with the wrong target audience. They weren't actually the right audience. I told you I wasn't a marketer, but I do know some of the terminology. Now, you may at this point be wondering, listening to that good old radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? Meaning you, that big finger pointing again. I will have a resources download, which is various information I have available. It'll be available in about 2 days. I had failed to get it up. I'm launching a video confidence course in the near future, around the end of the month, and I'm also offering a free consultation, and that can be 25 minutes, something like that, on any aspects of what I've talked about, and there will be time for Q&A at the end too. Yes? Yeah. My contact details, you can find me. I've overflowed on there, I wasn't on mine. On mine it was perfectly okay. Jim J. Doyle, remember the J, otherwise there's a poor guy over in Florida who keeps forwarding my fan mail. So that's on Twitter, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And speakingconfidence.co, there is a .uk down there. And a quick flash over just on the confidence course, but more to the point, if you want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is literally just send me a text with your name and email on there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, however strange and weird, I may have stimulated you to think about. I'll be more than happy to. And that is my contact details for now.
Questions?
All questions are welcome. Yes.
Well, if we're going to be all kind of unique characters out there, how do you balance that with professionalism, which can be, I think, a limiting factor?
We've made a series of choices to be where we are, and we've evolved through our career. But I'm working on helping people overcome the obstacles. The professionalism is fitting into that mold, some extent. That's what you mean, is it?
Sometimes if you're being professional,
Yeah.
you're very constrained.
Absolutely.
And you're doing yourself.
But is this in a smallest company or a larger company?
Well, I've worked in both. I'm on my own now, so...
Well, now you have the flexibility. Now you have the flexibility to give yourself permission, which is what an awful lot of this is about, to give yourself permission to expand it. Unless you're working with companies, if your customers are big companies who expect you to, wear the pinstripe suit or whatever it is, then that's a challenge because that's where you are. But you can still, perhaps, if you want to, and if it's necessary, work on expanding your dynamic personality. Yeah, to expand, to be more expressive, to change your expression, to be more relaxed, not so rigid in the way that we behave when we become professional. Does that make sense? Oh, it can't be. Surely there's not just one question.
So what was your biggest limiting factor when you were doing the Toastmasters? What was your thing that was your break?
What was my biggest? I've done a lot of work on myself. I seem to have had. It's a never-ending game because it's a question of dealing with the challenges as we come to them one by one. There isn't a magic pill that says right, you're done. Yeah, it's whenever we perceive we have a challenge that we need to get through. So Toastmasters. I did a lot of personal development work, as I say, on energy healing, and then applied that retrospectively. Yeah, sort of, if you like, retrospectively. And a lot of that was, I had a lot of ancestral stuff, I had an enormous amount of ancestral stuff, which really affected me in a big, big way. To be quite honest, it was really strange, and honestly, too much to go into here, because some people might go, what the hell? And I didn't choose that stuff. But just as a measurement tool, I was introduced to dowsing when I was 5 years old. That's, people who use rods or a broken stick to find water, or a pendulum. That's a natural skill we all have. It is a natural skill that everybody has, even though I can tell from lots of people who are going, that's good stuff. Actually, we all have that ability, because in the same way as we all have the ability to express ourselves. And as long as we have a clear mind, unbiased, that's prepared to accept a yes or no for an answer to any question, you can find out virtually anything with it. And it's precisely the same as kinesiology. Anybody familiar with it, where somebody holds your arm out and asks you questions, or gives you to hold a piece of medication or something to see if you're allergic to it? Your body is an incredibly intelligent machine. Beats an MRI scanner any time with the right questions. Does that partly answer the question?
Somewhat.
Right, last question over there. I imagine there'll be a few more.
Jim, one of the things you've been talking about here, you've been talking generally, but the focus has been on the video thing. And the thing I have found fascinating is generally I'm reasonably articulate and can talk to people and stuff. Bring a camera in, I've become a complete incoherent, babbling idiot.
Thank you.
And there's something really special about pointing a camera, certainly at me, and I guess I'm not talking you, Lee, that turns me into a fool.
Right, I'll go back up to that. Thank you for the question. So, because I actually overlooked covering the very specific point, which is what happens and where does it come from? Because I talked about ancestral and stuff. The reality is this growing up. Usually it's growing up. Somewhere along the way something happens to us. You know, about being laughed at, being joked at, being pointed at in the playground or by a teacher or something like that. We get put down and we feel bad about it. Now, when we going back to say standing in front of an audience, or with a camera, then there is aspects of that remind us of some negative feeling, some bad feeling we had, most likely when we were quite small, between probably the ages of 2 and 14, somewhere around there. And we may even have forgotten about it, or we may even believe that some specific thing we clearly remember is the cause of the problem. But it's often something much, much smaller, and we go, I measure it, and say, okay, so I might be talking to you and say, okay, let me just check something. And I'm doing kinesiology on me, using my muscle testing, while I'm asking questions about this gentleman whose name I failed to notice. And I'm literally checking, is the root of this problem, the trigger of this, from earlier in his life? And the answer is yes. And then is it before he's 5? No. Is it before he's 10? Is it before he's 15? Oh, okay, so it's between 10 and 15, yeah? And then it's say, okay, and I'll probably turn around and say, did something interesting happen to you? I say interesting, because I don't need to know the details. You can tell me for a week, but it won't mean anything to me. It only means something to you. Did something interesting happen to you, for example, between the ages of 12 and 13, yeah? Now, it could have been moved house, moved school, somebody died, who knows, anything, an accident. It doesn't matter what it is. But the next question is, when you think about that event, usually the person remembers. Yeah, usually. When you think about that event, where do you feel the tension in your body? And most people will go, what? Well, think about when you're stressed about a particular circumstance. The driving test, you know? You're proposing, your child's about to be born. You know? When you feel stressed, you feel it somewhere in your body. Typically, it's around the solar plexus, your heart, your throat, but it can vary significantly. It's usually around there. So if I say to you, where do you feel the tension in your body when you think about the event from that period of time we've identified? Usually you would say, for example, you say it's here, yeah? And then if I say to you, when you see a camera coming in the room, which bit of your body goes tight? And it'll probably be the same place. Probably, yeah? This is very commonly the case. But when you realize that in your story, that there's an event in your life that happened when you were a certain age, and this problem you have now, and you feel them both in the same place in your body, that's almost like rewiring your DNA, because you're suddenly going, hang on a minute, that is somehow related to this and begins to make sense. And it's only your story. I don't need to know the details. It doesn't matter what happened. And by knowing that, that gives us an opportunity to work with that, with visualization and various energetic exercises to help me clear it. And that's the kind of thing I did with this gentleman and lots of others. And by the way, in this business of mind, body, thoughts, you know, everything else, to me there is no difference between a confidence issue and an illness. There is no difference because we hold that tension somewhere. Does that sound strange? Because conventional wisdom says it's the mind, it's the body. They're not connected. Afraid so, but they're connected. Does that answer your question? Sort of.
It's a response, is it an answer?
Okay. Contact me, let's have a talk. Yeah? Seriously.
On that note, Jim,